Let's talk about Shockwave Totem. Cool. What's up, everybody? It's waba, and I'm going to be telling you about a Shockwave Totem build I am looking at for the 10-day event. I'm not necessarily sure if I'm going to be playing this myself, or if, I don't know what I'm doing for the event quite yet. I do know that I'm most likely going to be playing standard because of my work schedule, and if I do rip at any point and I work as much as I do, it will be it will ruin the entire event for me, and I want to have fun in these 10-day events. So Shockwave Totem is definitely one of the things that I'm looking at. After a couple days ago, Tarky Cat came into my chat and started asking me about Shockwave Totem, and I pointed Hierophant to him. I said, hey, check out Hierophant. And then I watched his video where he was talking about it, and he was saying that he was going to be going Hierophant, which makes sense. He's going to be going Hierophant with a helm that is crafted with an Essence of Insanity. Now, an Essence of Insanity grants you 50% of the physical damage by a gem that's socketed in it as extra lightning damage. That's pretty good. That's actually essentially like a better version of added fire. Also, because one thing that I really like about Shockwave Totem, or I guess not so much about Shockwave Totem, but about the gem choices available to Shockwave Totem, is that physical lightning is very, very strong for Shockwave Totem, because you don't get that traditional, it's like most lightning spells, it's a really low end and a high top end. So you have some inconsistencies, like you can have really big hits, but then you can have also really small hits. Now, when you're using a physical spell, which the damage ranges are much closer to each other, and then you convert it to lightning damage, you're essentially just getting much more consistent shocks out of that build. And that's the case for Shockwave Totem as well. But now if you're using an Essence of Insanity on a helm and you get that 50% damage as lightning, 50% physical damage added as extra lightning, you combine that with physical lightning, and all of a sudden you are hitting with a lot of lightning damage. So when you combine this with Hierophant, you essentially get a 6-link, and you get a 6-link because you go Illuminated Devotion, and it's actually kind of a 7-link. I'll explain, but let's just call it a 6-link for now, where your 5th link is a gem that gives you 50% extra, or 50% physical damage as extra lightning damage. That's like added fire. Okay, then you also get a elemental penetration gem at 20% elemental penetration. So this isn't nearly as good as a traditional penetration gem. But since you're doing, the way that I have this build set up right now, you're going to be dealing about 2/3 lightning damage and about 1/3 lightning damage. And this, this works out pretty well. Wait, 2/3 lightning damage and about 1/3 cold damage. But that elemental penetration does work out pretty well for this build. So you're on a 6-link, okay, a pseudo 6-link. We'll call it a 5.5 link, but really it is kind of like a 6-link, because not only do you get the benefit of those other damage modifiers, you're also running on the mana cost of a 4-link, and that's essentially like you have reduced mana, like in your links. So maybe we could call it a 7-link, but whatever. It's just gonna be, a pseudo 6-link, but it's one that you could kind of like really count on, especially if, as long as you're not playing solo self-found, you could trade for Essence of Insanity pretty early, and you just throw it on any helm. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter like what stats you get on the helm. As long as you could craft 50 or 60 life on there, it doesn't matter. So this build is actually a really good way to get a good reliable 6-link and source of damage out of Shockwave Totem, because Shockwave Totem has never really been that bad in terms of like clearing. Shockwave Totem really starts to falter in higher tier maps with you know, with the bosses. But really, you could kill bosses still with it. You just, you know, it takes you a minute. But the upcoming Mayhem and Turmoil events won't even really be about boss killing at all. It's going to be about going into these breaches, you know, and going into these maps with, you know, these mods and, you know, huge pack size and sextant blocking and everything, and combining that with breaches. So this build will operate pretty well in terms of that. So this is going to be the tree. There are a couple ways you can do this. The way Tarky Cat is planning on doing this, if he does, is he's actually planning on coming down here to the Scion Life Wheel through right below Sanctity. And he'll be grabbing Totemic Mastery and Totemic Zeal. While I really like both, I like Totemic Zeal a lot more than I like Totemic Mastery. I don't think Totemic Mastery is really that good. And you get a lot of that life. I don't really like this pathing that much. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's definitely an option. But you know, it's probably a little bit better for hardcore, but I think your damage will be lacking for quite a while with this build, because the one thing you will really want with a Shockwave Totem build for these events is to get a level 20 Shockwave Totem, and, you know, potentially a level 21. So those, you know, having a 20 and 21 Shockwave Totem will be really good, but when you path all the way down here, your damage is going to be probably a little bit slower. Although Totemic Mastery gives you placement speed and Totemic Zeal gives you a lot of placement speed, 45% total and 61% between the two of them, I don't really think that it's that worth it. I don't think it's worth it for the points invested or in the travel points, because you just have to add a lot to that. Then on top of that, you already get totem placement speed in the ascendancy points for Hierophant. You get 40% right here. So I just don't really think it's that necessary, but it's something you could do. There's really nothing wrong with it. Something that I am actually looking at, though, is adding shock effectiveness. And this is actually something that I really want to play with. I want to try out builds with shock effectiveness, because I don't think it's really been utilized that much. You know, maybe it hasn't been utilized because you could simply look at Path of Building and, you know, see, okay, well, like, if I can't shock Shaper, then what's the point? If I can't shock Shaper, if I can't shock the Guardians, there's no point in really going for shock effectiveness. But I think that this will still really help, especially in like the tier 13 to tier 15 mapping range, especially in breaches and with beyond bosses and everything. I think when you factor in those things, I think shock effect is like really, really good, because we could actually go to the calculations in PO and Path of Building, and essentially according to this, it says for shock to apply, a target must have no more than 1.15 million health. And, you know, I'm not so familiar with the health of bosses and everything, but I have a feeling that most bosses are going to be in that like 700,000 to 1 million health range for tier 13 to tier 15, including beyond bosses, you know. So I don't know how much health they usually have, but I think that's about where they are, because Shaper has about 20 million health, and I think Hydra has like 9 million health, and I've looked at it recently, but because this is what I wanted to find out. I wanted to find out with shock effectiveness, could I shock, you know, Minotaur? Could I shock Hydra? And so I started looking at the health and everything, and, you know, I don't even come close. There are some ways you can come close, I think, but because I think you get, I've figured out, like, I've moved some numbers around in Path of Building, and I've gone to just about 2 million health or the target must not have more than 2 million health. So that's something to consider. And on top of that, If you can't shock, then you just use a Val Lightning Trap, and then there will be shocking ground. It won't be as good as a 50% shock, but I believe it's either a 15 or 20% effect shock. So whatever. So I'm going to be trying out shock effectiveness. You're dealing like about 2/3 of your damages will be lightning with this build. The rest of it will be cold damage. So you're still benefiting from the elemental penetration. I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to be using Intuitive Leap over here. It doesn't really save you any points. If anything, it does start to give you the option to get this power charge and this frenzy charge, which are both pretty good. You know, you have a lot of options. Like I said, you could kind of play this how you want. For clearing, you know, I'm going to be having Conviction of Power, so all of a sudden having this power charge here and grabbing this power charge right here and getting the spell damage per power charge is, and then this one here, you know, that's pretty good. That'll put me at five power charges and 20% increased spell damage. So yeah, you know, this is something that I'm looking at. The items that I'm considering using right here, pretty straightforward. A Wise Oak, an Anatomical Knowledge. You don't necessarily need to do this. An Anatomical Knowledge is the gem that gives you base life per intelligence in the radius. And we're using this in the top part of the tree. Honestly, it probably doesn't matter. You could probably just throw in a rare jewel with crit multi or lightning damage or totem damage, and it would be just fine. Or cast speed. It really doesn't matter. But Assassin's Haste, you know, Intuitive Leap, maybe I won't use this. You know, it doesn't really matter. Will I have access to it in 10 days? I could probably get access to an Intuitive Leap in 10 days, as everyone should be able to. Wise Oak. Now, the one thing that I am using here that is really accessible and I think is kind of cool, but can potentially be switched to something else, like a more DPS. Well, actually, it can be switched to two other things. It can be switched to a Biscos, one, and it can be switched to a rare amulet that gives all stats. Now, if you switch to a if you switch to a Biscos with this build, you need to worry about your dexterity and your strength, which is one of the nice things about Aziri's Foible. Aziri's Foible, you know, it's going to give you a large amount of flat mana. It's going to give you a lot of mana regeneration and increase maximum mana. It's really good, and you could corrupt them. So if you get +1 maximum res, you get +1 frenzy charges, you get additional curse. Although in my situation, additional curse won't really help me because I'm going to be running with the support. Aziri's Foible is a fantastic thing to level with all the way. Essentially, it will make gearing really easy. It will make leveling your gems really easy, and you won't ever really have to worry about it. If you switch away from it, if you decide to not use an Aziri's Foible, then you need to consider getting more more strength and more dexterity. Okay. Hymn Sorrow. This is just to convert the rest of our physical damage to cold damage. You know, we're an elemental build and we're taking elemental nodes, so this makes elemental nodes like 100% effective when we don't deal any physical damage. A Carcass Jack, you don't need a Carcass Jack for this build, like at all. In fact, the 20% AoE doesn't even matter. You could use a rare chess piece. You could use so many things. It doesn't matter. You know, I would just say something with life and resist. This gives a lot of area damage, which is pretty good. And yeah, again, just a helm with Essence of Insanity crafted. Rare rings. You know, you could probably get rare rings. If you know, you could get more damage on your rare rings. You could get crit multi from the I forgot. I think it's Envy, or is it Dread? I don't know. One of the essences that gives you crit multi on jewelry when you craft it. You could get Crib Multi on your jewelry. You could get lightning damage, you know, through essence crafting. You can use opal rings, which gives you elemental damage. You could, you know, craft an opal ring with those things. So you can get DPS out of your rings, and it would be a pretty big chunk of DPS, or a pretty big chunk of damage. I have a Doriana's Catalyst in here. Again, this is pretty accessible. This build will be able to kill Adziri. I can tell you that, absolutely. So you could farm yourself Doriana's Catalyst pretty easily. You could probably kill Adziri like day 1 or day 2 with a Shockwave Totem build, especially in Standard. You know, hardcore, you have to consider some things, but in Standard, you will be fine. You will be able to kill Adziri and the trio and whatnot. I would probably wait till at least your totem is level 19, though, to be completely honest. But yeah, so, you know, an energy shield with some spell damage, cast speed. You know, this obviously this is going to offer you a lot of damage, but you don't necessarily need to use that. You're probably more likely to get damage off of a ring than off of a shield, but honestly, like, it doesn't matter. You could use a Wrath Pith here. You don't have to use a rare. But yeah, so this is the build that I'm looking at right now for the Turmoil event. The one last thing that I'll add about this, Turmoil and Mayhem rather, the one thing that I will add about this is that there is the possibility of eventually going low life. Unfortunately, if you go low life, you essentially have to drop Illuminated Devotion. Like, you will have to go Ritual of Awakening and Sanctuary of Thought. And in order for you to go low life, you know, Solaris Lorica is fine, but to compete with this, you would really need a 6-link, and you would probably need an Empower, because going back to the whole, you know, this build is like a guaranteed and pseudo 6-link. It's actually a pretty good 6-link for Shockwave Totem, because as you socket more gems to Shockwave Totem, you lose other gems that you could use with it. Your 6th link, you know, you're looking at things like Empower or Added Fire or Elemental Focus, and you know, they all have their own drawbacks. Added Fire, I guess, doesn't have too much of a drawback other than the fact that it's a red gem, and you should be fine on strength, because obviously you're gonna have a level 21 Shockwave Totem. But, you know, I don't know. It's fire damage sucks. You want to shock and you want to freeze, right? You want to shock, you want to shatter, and no one wants to ignite anymore. It's 2017 and 3.0 Path of Exile. No one wants to ignite anymore. So Added Fire is out. Empower is good when it's level 3 or level 4, and it's much better. And then it gets better when you have +1 gems on your chest piece. So it's like you're looking at a 6-link with Empower that's corrupted to level 4, with the 6-link being corrupted to have, you know, +1 socketed gems. And then Elemental Focus, again, you want to shock and you want to shatter. So Elemental Focus is probably something you wouldn't ever want to use unless you're doing Shaper. Unless you're doing, you know, those high health bosses that you're not going to shock or shatter anyway, when you're just going for as much damage as possible. In that case, Elemental Focus is pretty damn good, but overall, not so much. So yeah, I don't know. I wanted to make this video and kind of talk about it a little bit. I didn't script this in any way, so if it comes out like really weird and all over the place, I apologize. I was just, you know, kind of vomiting my thoughts out to the world and everything. Big takeaways from this: pseudo 6-link with Illuminated Devotion and an Essence of Insanity on Hierophant for Shockwave Totem. Utilizing shock effectiveness, because I don't really think, you know, we've had much of an opportunity to do that yet. And yeah, you know, a pretty good way to get a good map clear for these 10-day events. So with that said, thanks for watching. If you liked it, you know, subscribe or whatever. Throw me a like. If you have any comments or questions, put them down below. I'll respond to them when I can. And yeah, cool. Thanks.